What is going on, all you awesome superhero aficionados? This is the Heroes and Mutants podcast. I'm Nick with my co-hosts Jimmy, Ruben, and Eric. Had to make sure we got the whole cast on for today's amazing episode. Probably the most significant event in superhero history as of right now or this moment, because which is the hard thing to say, but
At the
I
very
honestly felt
least,
like it was.
at the very least of the year.
Yeah.
I would say all time probably. Well, just given the scope and the stakes and everything was at play, everything, the culmination of 20 years, like this has been pretty hype to say the least, especially when you consider everything that went into it and the process and all the rumors and all of the denials that took place over all of this. But No Way Home has finally swung into theaters and it was pretty amazing. Let's first get into your guys' first thoughts when all of the updates came about. What was your guys' expectations going into it, or as things started to develop?
All right, I'll admit I was really excited for it because Spider-Man is my favorite Marvel hero. It's probably my second favorite superhero. It's a character that means a lot to me, means more than most characters mean to me. And I was excited for it, but I had this vague worry in the back of my head that they weren't going to pull in all the universes right, or it was just going to be cameos or something like that.
I mean, cash grab cameos.
Yeah, cash grab cameos.
Yeah.
And I think my biggest fear was like this was not going to be organic storytelling. This is just to get people excited with nostalgia. And it is that, but as a storyline, they incorporated all of it and made it seem very organic. It made it seem like it all belonged together. And it was everything I could have asked for in a Spider-Man movie. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to probably say, and again, there's my bias because it's my connection to the character and what Spider-Man has meant to me my whole life. This is my favorite film in the MCU.
Definitely.
Okay.
What do you think, Eric? Expectations?
I thought it was really good. Expectations, I was trying not to get too hung up with all the rumors and everything. And I know, especially on this podcast, we kept looking into new rumors and kept bringing them up. And I haven't watched it a second time yet, but first time, I mean, it met my expectations. It was an amazing movie. And like, first and foremost, like all these rumors, I was just thinking in the back of my mind how cool this movie would have been if I didn't hear like any of the spoilers at all. Right? Like
Exactly.
how intense would some of these moments have been with like, and obviously we're gonna have spoilers in this episode, right? Spoilers.
Yeah.
That's your spoiler warning.
I don't think you
Yeah.
could get into like an in-depth conversation.
No way.
So I mean, like the moments when you have Toby's character and Andrew Garfield, their Spider-Man come in. Like I still had fun with that. I thought it was awesome because like you said, we didn't know what to expect with how they were going to be brought in and what level they were actually going to influence the story or the plot or how that was going to move forward. But I was really surprised by how deep they dove into the actual villains, and we can touch on that later. But I think that was kind of the highlight of the movie for me. And I'm not at Jimmy's level yet. I don't have it as the best MCU movie. I still
Again,
the top spot for me is still Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay.
That's still the number one for me. But it's up there. I have it up there with Endgame as like top 5 easily, probably top 3. But a great movie overall. And yeah, I mean, just on initial viewing, it met all my expectations. I was super happy with it.
Yeah, straight
What,
up.
what about you, Ruby?
I gotta agree with you guys on everything you guys just said. Like, I mean, expectation wise, I agree with Eric. Because nowadays it's hard with social media. It's out there, and then especially with como se llama, who was it? The English that came out with it 2 days earlier. That made it even tougher on social media with try not to that the movie gets spoiled by spoilers basically.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I knew that I called it. I knew Andrew and you Toby were gonna come out. So I was hoping to be proven wrong in a way, but in a way not. In a way
I feel
didn't
that.
want to be proven wrong because like there was rumors already, So I was like, okay, well the little expectation, I won't be as shocked if I do see them on screen. sure enough,
Yeah.
they came out. I was excited, man. I ain't gonna lie. So expectation wise, it lived up to what I thought it was gonna be, and maybe even a little better. Because when I try to rate it, I know we'll get down to that. I was trying to find a little flaw for it, but I had like with the expectations I had, I just couldn't. I really loved it. I loved the movie.
I actually do think the movie has a couple of flaws, but I love everything else about it so much, and it satisfied and blew away my expectations and was such an emotional thing that the minor flaws that I have with it,
He just threw them away, like you threw them out the window.
Yeah, they hardly matter at all to me.
I think when the expectations first started, when it was revealed that Jamie Foxx was going to be reprising his role, and then when that whole internet broke, I think about a year, it was December 2020 when it was revealed that Alfred Molina was going to be reprising his role, and that further reiterated that point that this was going to be a Spider-Verse film, where they were going to be taking a lot of inspiration from that. So at that point, we had to have known that Tobey and Andrew were going to be appearing in some capacity. And then when the trailers revealed that the Green Goblin was going to be in it, Willem Dafoe was coming back, and then the second that last trailer revealed that Sandman, Thomas Hayden Church, and Kurt Connors, aka the Lizard, Arias Ifans, I'm not even sure how to pronounce his name, but all of that considered, everything thrown in together, we knew that there was just no way at all that we weren't going to be seeing Tobey and Andrew. So I think with me, I was afraid of those cash grab cameos, like the way, especially with that second trailer that they had with Strange at the very end saying they're coming through and I can't stop them. I actually thought that was going to be the moment where we see Tobey and Andrew come. I had no idea they were going to be coming in like before that final act. And I actually was pretty surprised that they had so much weight and connection to the story. And you saw them actually talking about their experiences with dealing with loss and dealing with tragedy and dealing with the idea of what it truly means to be Spider-Man and being mirrored and marked by that tragedy, but pushing through it to push and become something better. And I think that was a lot of the problems I had with this version of Spider-Man, where we didn't see him come into his own, and he was a lot of that Iron Man Jr. and really that arc that this character went on. I was pleasantly surprised that with all the whole multiverse aspect, it was such an emotional and personal story for this version of Peter Parker, for Tom Holland, and how a lot of that just really was salting that meat and really just was topping that cherry on top with Tobey and Andrew, and a lot of those personal connections. Like a lot of it really blew out my expectations, where I thought the whole multiverse alone was going to work for me. But the fact that this was such a compelling, great story on top of it, and there was a lot of thought and a lot of careful consideration and caution with using these characters, and even just a lot of those interactions between like Tobey and Alfred Molina.
Peter.
Well, they're like with each one of their interactions with their own villains. I really appreciated and respected the movie for handling a lot of that with care and showing that there was such a journey and an arc for all these characters. Like everything about it just blew my expectations, and it exceeded everything that I knew, everything I thought this was going to be.
Yeah, I actually want to touch on something that you briefly touched on. The fact that this movie kind of completed our current Spider-Man, Tom Holland's origin story. And that was always one of my qualms with this version of Spider-Man, where because Spider-Man in the comic books, he's always at the street level, and he's like struggling to find his own. And from the very beginning,
pay his bills, got to worry about school, his relationships, like.
And it's crazy how I mean, ever since they brought him into Civil War, and he was, like you said, he was always under Tony Stark. And he never had issues with money. Tony Stark always gave him what he needed. And I always had an issue also with the Uncle Ben dichotomy that you see in the other Spider-Man. Like, you never really see him mention it. And obviously in this movie, we find out that his Uncle Ben is Aunt May. And he got to that level because she dies in this movie because of him. And you see the other two Peters kind of react to that, and like, we went through the same thing, but it was just Uncle Ben for us. So it's crazy to see how the first two movies and even the beginning of this movie are essentially like Spider-Man's wrestling period in the comic books, or in the first Spider-Man. You see that too, right? When he's wrestling just because he has these powers and he's just going to use them to make some money. Except Tom Holland had powers, and the reason he uses powers wasn't necessarily because he had this like higher calling that he got from Uncle Ben, but it was because there was already well-established superheroes.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I have powers, so I'm just gonna do what they do. But at the end of this film, especially after Aunt May dies, you see that he comes into his own, and it's a whole different reason for why he's Spider-Man now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, with this one, with Tom Holland, I had a lot of similar complaints. I've always liked Tom Holland in the role. I've always thought he was a wonderful Spider-Man. Ever since he first showed up in Civil War, I've always really dug him. But I've always felt, even when I really enjoyed Homecoming and I enjoyed Far From Home, but there was always a part of me that nagged about this version of the character, that it did not feel like a comic book accurate version of Spider-Man in many ways, which to me was shocking at first for the MCU that worked so hard to be more faithful than any other iteration. I was like, why is there Spider-Man not like Spider-Man? I'm like, for a second, I was like, I had assumed they already did the Uncle Ben storyline off screen.
Yeah.
And it disappointed me, and I was like, why don't they ever at least make reference to it, or we get the sense that he understands his responsibility? Yeah. I never felt he really struggled. The way that they played up his villains bothered me. I always felt like they felt like Tony Stark rejects.
Yeah.
Like they felt like Iron Man villains, leftover Iron Man villains that Peter Parker was contending with. And I complained, I was like, what made Peter Parker so interesting as a character is a lot of his relationships with the villains and with their alter egos. And I felt like a lot of that was missing from this iteration. He didn't struggle enough for me. The technology was too much. It did not feel like Peter Parker. I did not like that he was not making his own suit. And this movie just fixed all of that. And it turns out I guess we had this plan all along. I didn't realize that the Uncle Ben storyline never actually played out. I thought they just thought, oh, people are tired of that. They don't want to see it anymore. So we're just—
That's what I thought. Yep.
Yeah, same.
And no, they were actually building up to it in a different way. And what I liked about Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in this movie is, one, I thought they were going to be cameos. I thought it was going to be like at the end scene, and this is what I didn't want to see. I didn't want the whole movie to be about Tom Holland, and then at the last minute, the multiverse breaks open, and in drops Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire to help him save the day in one final battle. I was like, that's going to be cheap just to have them just show up and pop up really quick. But they ended up being very developed characters and really good parts. And none of them felt like a non-valid version of Spider-Man in this universe. Even though Tom Holland was obviously the main one, they all felt equally valid. And it builds upon the storytelling of the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy and the Amazing Spider-Man films by using their story arcs and their tragedy to outline Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man, and the way that all three of them have to go through some kind of personal tragedy that teaches them hard lessons about life and what it means to be a hero really beautifully echoes each other. And I think that's what makes this such a great Spider-Man movie. It outlines the importance of Peter Parker, who he is and who his struggles and what he has to go through, and having all three of them together relating what each one had to go through was kind of beautiful for me.
Well, I'm glad that's how you feel, Jimmy, because what I want to touch on a little deeper into that is because, like, if you recall, what I always said, the reason why I think Tom Holland is probably one of my favorite Spider-Mans is because when it comes to the comics, the storylines might not touch to the comics, but he is the Spider-Man, like the best Spider-Man related person when I say to teenage-wise issues that we can relate to. So I feel like they were doing that on purpose. And that's why I said I'm glad you feel that way, that this new movie that just came out, it answered all the questions you had basically, because I feel like they did it on purpose. Where Tom Holland, even in this final movie, he was still acting like a teenage kid, irresponsible, wasn't taking his responsibility seriously, and if he was taking his responsibility seriously, but not at the highest level where he grew into at the end of the movie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he definitely, they definitely killed it in this movie with him growing into his his confidence grew, I think, like 10 times more at the end of the film, bro. And we saw at the end of the movie where he sold up his own Spider-Man costume, the legit comic, accurate freaking, costume, and he sold it himself with Aunt May's freaking sewing machine. Like that's all heartfelt, bro. But I feel like this movie, they did it like everything built up for this. Everything was building up for this specific movie.
Yeah.
And
he learned at the end that he finally turned into a man. He's not a teenage boy anymore.
Definitely.
Like it made like every Spider-Man movie feel like it was one part of one series and one franchise the whole time, even though it never was. I think it's almost I mean, it obviously wasn't planned, but I find it very interesting when you think about it that all three versions of this character, none of them recycled any of the same villains over. They all used, each universe used their own villains, and that kind of ended up working for this version of the story. And man, it was also very emotional. It reminded me a lot of my childhood because of the Tobey Maguire aspect. Reminded me of like Into the Spider-Verse and the cartoon. It felt like it was a tribute to everything Spider-Man has ever been in its entire history of comic books, cartoons, movies, different franchises. Like just a tribute to what the character has meant to so many of us over the years.
Yeah, definitely.
Like,
And what great is something I've been touching upon and something I've been wanting to see for a long time. Or I know me and Jimmy discussed it, but I really appreciated and was very surprised that we finally saw that vengeful, rageful side that Peter, that darker side that he has to him in the comics, doesn't get brought out a lot. But when he's pushed to that point, it's you're going to want to stand the hell away back from him. And I really respect all of the producers and all the writing team for actually going really willing to go that route and really seeing Peter's vengeful side and actually starting to throw punches and actually starting to really take out that combat aspect of his character. And just because, I mean, that's something that I really relate to and something I've really wanted to see more with this character. So that I wasn't sure if they were ever willing to go that route of that darker aspect or play upon those darker themes. And I really respect and appreciate that they were willing to go that route. And I know Holland, about a week or two before the movie came out, had said like these are going to be the most violent scenes that we've done for this character so far in the MCU.
I mean, Tom Holland was also saying, and he said this a few times, one of the things that bothers him about his version of Spider-Man, he said he was jealous of the Tobey Maguire movies. He's like, I want to get like my costume ripped up and bloody and dirtied when I'm fighting. I wanted to actually struggle. He's like, I feel like we don't do that in my version of Spider-Man. He wanted to get to that kind of point, and I think we're finally at that point. It erased, I mean, obviously the ending is very sad, but it kind of turns Spider-Man into what we think of in the comics, where he has to build his own, where he has to make his own costume. He's going to be in his own apartment in New York, trying to make a living, trying to be a superhero. He's not going to be relying on Tony Stark technology anymore. He has no connection to the Avengers now because none of them are going to even know who they
remember. Yeah.
It's just press the reset button and is forcing him to become the Spider-Man of the comic books. And I found it very interesting that they took 3 movies to get to that point. It was obviously planned, but Tom Holland finally grew into the Spider-Man that we always kind of wanted to see. And I thought it was spectacular, dude. I thought such a good movie.
Yeah, that's a beautiful movie.
Definitely. Let's talk about the plot for a little bit. What really worked about it for you guys? Is there anything that you felt was a little bit off, something that could have been better? How did you guys feel about how just the story developed and everything that went into it?
For the plot, I thought it was really neat how what we saw in the trailers and everything was only like the first half hour, 40 minutes of the film. Like the problem from the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, where everyone figures out who he is, like, and that whole scene where like Daredevil comes in, he's a lawyer, and he basically just says, all right, this whole issue, it's done, so you don't have to worry about this anymore. But I mean, people still knew obviously who he was, but at that point I was like, okay, this is moving really quickly, this is going somewhere else, right, entirely, that I wasn't ready for. So I enjoyed the plot, I think, and you might get into this too, Jimmy. There's like a little lull in the middle of the movie for me, where he has to go and start essentially collecting villains like they're freaking Pokemon. Like,
he's gotta catch them all.
Yeah,
he's Spider-Man. Gotta web them all.
Yeah.
So that whole bit where he's like out like getting everyone, I was like, okay, this is really weird. And I almost didn't feel how believable it was that the villains were all just okay with going into his house at first. And obviously, Osborn had something else in mind in going to the house. But regardless, it just felt really weird for me, like that part of the plot.
Yeah,
But
I know what you mean.
but that switch up with Osborn, that was very in character for him. I really liked Doc Ock, like after his chip is switched, is very reminiscent of, I don't know if you played the Spider-Man video games, the relationship that Peter Parker has with Doc Ock in the Spider-Man video games, where he's almost like a mentor to him, and you see that in the comics as well.
You see it in the movie too, though.
Yeah. So with the AI just like fixed for him, how that relationship is automatically like there again. I thought that was really cool. I thought having that part of the plot where he comes in at the end and helps the Spider-Man, I thought all of that was really cool, really neat. It was just that middle part of the plot was just kind of weird for me, and I feel like it was almost forced, but they had to go in that direction. And after seeing the whole thing, like a holistic view of it, I understand why they did it.
Yeah.
Okay,
And not only that, they can get away with it because they're villains. So it's a two-faced kind of aspect to it. You know, they're like, okay, I'll go along with you, Spider-Man, but when you least expect it, it's bound to happen. Where someone's gonna do it, turn their back, and sure enough, the rest just follow along.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have go on.
I was gonna say, last thing, it really bothered me how Jamie Foxx's character just switched up from Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Oh, hell yeah.
He was so different.
He was cocky about his looks and all that.
Yeah.
He was like cocky and cool and like 100% confidence in himself.
Yeah, I was like, what just happened?
They did give kind of a wonky explanation for why he's changed. He's like, I guess in this universe, it's different. I'm like, if that's the case, then why is nobody else changed? Then why is like, shouldn't they be transformed a little bit? But I kind of get it. Jamie Foxx's Electro in Amazing Spider-Man 2 was kind of lame. I did not like.
And he wasn't even the main antagonist either for that movie.
He was just to distract.
They needed an excuse to turn him into like Electro, and I like that he actually got the classic look from the comic books. That's another thing.
Referencing it, yeah.
Green Goblin. I nearly fucking jumped up in my seat when he got on his glider after Aunt May's dead, and you're looking at him, and then it just clicked with me. I was like, wait, that's the classic Green Goblin of the comic books with purple tatters
and all that stuff.
Well, I figured that much when they released the photos of Jamie Foxx, Doc Ock, and him, because when you see him, it's that scene where he first is looking at them at the Sanctum Sanctorum, where he's looking at them in the cells. Like, you see the purple around it, and I'm like, oh, cool. They're going to be referencing the comics a little bit. That's awesome. Quick question, though. I don't mean to cut you out, Jimmy, but did Electro in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, did he know that Peter was Spider-Man?
No.
I don't think he did.
No. I think...
No, it's
because the spell was very specific on it's bringing in people who knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. So I'm like, wait a minute, because Harry didn't know until he had seen Gwen at the very end. So I'm like, wait a minute, I don't think he knew that he was. That was another thing I was thinking about.
I feel like if I recall, I think he did, because I remember he would always call him Max, and then he would always be like, "How do you know my name?" You know, if I recall.
But he was
as Spider-Man though.
Yeah,
he never met him as.
I felt like in that movie he was doing what MJ did with Tom Holland. Like, he just put the clues together. 1 and 1 equals 2. You know.
I need to go back and rewatch it, but as far as I know, he didn't, because Harry didn't even know about it until he had seen Gwen, and he was like Peter, and I'm like, wait a minute. So I don't think he knew that he was Spider-Man.
The reason I think he did was because his reaction to seeing Andrew Garfield's identity, his version of Spider-Man, he said, I thought you would be black.
Exactly.
It was his reason for it. So that means, I would assume that means he didn't know his identity.
That further just made it more obvious to me. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't think he did know.
That's true. I forgot about that.
I have to admit, I liked Electro in this movie, but the way his look changed and the way that he's brought in is probably the most forced villain. Like, they just needed to bring in but
it was more comic accurate.
Yeah,
I think it's because it's Jamie Foxx too. Jamie Foxx is a great actor. He has a lot of pull and star power. So I mean, he was the first one that they brought in. So I think they were not sure if they were going to be able to get the other villains. So they're like, oh, well, we can probably, if we can get Jamie Foxx, because that was the first one to where it was hinting at something larger at play in terms of the Spider-Verse. But getting back to things with the plot, Jimmy, did you have like anything specific you want to talk about? What you liked, what didn't work for you?
I didn't necessarily dislike the catching them all, like you said, like Pokemon. What I did have a weird issue with is some of the Aunt May's choices where I'm like, are you really telling Peter that he needs to sacrifice the entire universe for these 5 individuals? Like, I get it. I understand the heroic part and like doing the right thing. But I'm not really convinced that, I mean, the story had to go, but that doesn't really sound like the most responsible thing in the world to me, if I'm being perfectly honest. And there is one Aunt May joke that bothered me because I was like, that's not funny. It's obvious he's not an octopus, where she asked Doc Ock if he wants salt water. I'm like,
oh, yeah.
I was like,
salt water?
Yeah, he's obviously a human being with machinery attached to him aside, but like, he's not I don't know.
I thought she was being sarcastic.
Yeah,
then
that's
the
what
way,
I took it as.
she reacted. She was like, okay, regular water it is. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, is she being serious? Like, I thought it was just meant to be
I
funny
feel like
or
it was
punny
one of
kind
those
like
yeah, like one of those dad jokes, but as an aunt, you know, it was an aunt joke. So,
that's what I felt. She like tried to hit a joke and missed, and she just moved on.
Yeah, okay, all right, that makes a lot more sense. But go.
Oh yeah.
Go, Eric.
But before we get to Willem Dafoe, I wanted to go back to Electro for 1 second. And so the whole thing you were saying about how he might not have known the identity, there was a villain that, like you mentioned, knew Peter Parker's identity and their Spider-Man's identity, and he didn't show up in this movie, and that was Harry Osborn, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, I think it's really important. Like, I mean, there's a theory also that Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. Remember that part where he says that he stopped pulling his punches?
Yeah, exactly.
So there's actually a deleted scene in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 where he like beats up Harry Osborn like to a pulp, and he stops pulling his punches, and it's almost implied that he's left dead. So I wonder if they took that and they made it canon, because Harry Osborn didn't show up in this, and he was obviously like sad about it when they were talking in the lab, when he was saying that I stopped pulling my punches.
Best friends.
Yeah, talking about best friends and all that. I was just wondering. I was like, I was expecting him to show up at some point, and especially after that spell, I'm like, oh, he's gonna show up randomly, because we were also talking about who's gonna be the Sinister Six, who's gonna be the sixth person, and I was kind of half expecting him to show up because he knows the identity and all that. But I wonder if there's something there too. I might be reading into it too much, but even then, I thought it was the villain's portrayal, Electro, was pretty cool. But yeah, we can go to Willem Dafoe now.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to finish. Me and Ruben didn't finish on like our thoughts or analysis on the plot. We'll talk about villains and stuff like after this. Or
wait, Ruben, really quick. This conversation is going 1,000 different directions.
I know. So much to say.
Another reason I don't think Harry Osborn, or that version of Harry Osborn, is in this is because one of the things that makes this aspect of the story effective is when Norman Osborn comes, and it's a world where he doesn't exist, where there's no such thing as Oscorp, and none of that was ever real. I feel like that would have thrown in extra confusion, and a lot. You'd have to go deeper into the storytelling, because like, wait, this isn't my son. There's another Harry Osborn. Like, I just feel like it would have created too much too much stuff for the screenwriters to try to like kink out and figure out. I was like, that would have thrown too much complication.
Well, I don't think it would have been confusing, but I do agree where it would have been too much for the story to go deeper into that aspect, because I think just the whole best friend storytelling in the lab says a lot to do with it, because obviously it was Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man that says, like when Ned asks him, like, oh, so who's your best friend? You know, like Ned was so like really wanted to find out about their best friends, and once he found out, it was so funny. But it was like you know, so he's like, yeah, my best friend tried to kill me. Like he died in my arms, like after he tried killing me. You know, so I was like, damn, that's freaking deep. Yeah. And then I don't know if you noticed when he says that, like Andrew Garfield kind of like glances over him. You know, you feel like damn, like my best friend kind of did the same thing too, and it was they didn't say the name, like, you know, but we obviously know if the real Spider-Man fans, we all know it's Harry.
Yeah.
So I feel like just by Toby saying that alone, Andrew didn't have to go deeper into that aspect. But it was funny because then Ned was kind of like, well, damn, should I keep helping now? Remember when and then after the fact that happens, he goes to the computer, like, let me look this up. But then he's like, no, I can't do this. Gotta walk away. So he walks away. So that's what I'm saying. I just feel like the whole area aspect, they could be waiting for it down the line, like you said, for the future Sinister Six, because I don't know if y'all saw in the shadow at the end, the Clado, Craven the Hunter with his long
Rhino.
Rhino, yeah.
And Rhino, yeah. I saw
Rhino.
Rhino. For sure.
Rhino.
I for sure saw Rhino, but Craven was there too, bro.
Yeah.
And you could see the fur coat around him and all that. But like I said, who knows?
That part. Wait, where was that at again?
It was at the end on top of the Empire State Building.
When Doctor Strange says they're coming through.
Yeah, that's the first figure I saw.
Yeah, he had his staff and everything. So he was one of the ones that they showed their silhouette, and then they showed Rhino silhouette.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're gonna have to watch that. Yeah, but there's for sure they gave a glimpse of Craven the Hunter. But like I said, they might be waiting on that, and then that's all I'll touch on that aspect.
Definitely. Just getting back real quick, I wanted to finish up with the last kind of thoughts about the plot, any drawbacks or just what I thought about it. I actually felt that it was a lot of things just made sense. And I felt like I did feel a little bit in the same way Eric did, where things were moving a little bit quick. It immediately picks up like right at the ending of No Way Far From Home. And him coming to terms of grappling with what's going on and how things are changing. It's messing up the lives of the people that he cares about. A lot of it develops pretty quickly. That's true. I didn't exactly feel like anything. I think only with regards to like the middle, it kind of becomes a little bit like Pokemon in a sense. But I think with me, I wish we could have had a little bit of a redemption for Flash. It's more of a nitpick, but Flash is still a very shitty character who I feel like is probably the least liked character. I'm like, does this guy even really need to be here? Like, I was hoping we would see him become remorseful and try to apologize to Peter. Hey, I was sorry for being a bit of a dick to you. And there could have even been a little bit of redemption for the way he acted in the past. Like, I know you guys just got rejected from MIT. Here's the chancellor's information. This is to make up for what I did, how I've treated you in the past. Instead of like, you know what I want. Okay, I'll tell people you're our best friend. Okay, here's their. I was like, really? Like, god damn, this guy sucks. Like, he's shitty. Like,
now that I think they did on purpose. Go for it, Jimmy.
I actually think the Amazing Spider-Man 2, or Amazing Spider-Man, actually handled that aspect better because Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man humiliated Flash much more than Tom Holland's version ever did. Yet when Uncle Ben died, he had like a moment where he tried to like level with him and like. He even allowed him to take his anger out on him. Like, he even understood why he would want to snap on him. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, this version of Flash did not get a redemption. But I didn't.
But we had a version of Flash in the Tobey Maguire version, too.
Yeah, but did he redeem himself?
He was at Harry's funeral in Spider-Man 3. So, they probably, teenage angst and what happened in high school was a lifetime ago. I think they came to terms with what was going on. I'm sure Peter still felt bad, obviously, about what he did. So I think it's more because out of all of the characters, that was the one I never liked at all. And you could say what you want about the others. There were things I was like, okay, I can see where they're going. But it's because he started off shitty and he ended shitty. And I'm like, there were like the other characters I really did like. And having them there, I felt a lot of their journeys, a lot of their arcs. But also, too, it might just be me nitpicking a little bit. This is a very minor character in the Spider-Man universe. And I'm like, does he really need to be someone who has a redemption? Or even just, I was just hoping
we still got 3 more movies, bro.
He don't need redemption. I think they're just going to turn him into a villain eventually.
Dude, Agent Venom, he could become.
Yeah, they left the symbiote in the after credits. Yep, they left the symbiote in this version. And I think there wasn't supposed to be a redemption for Flash. I think, purpose. Yeah, it was done on purpose for you to see how into himself he is, and he only cares about himself. I mean, he was still in high school. Now he's in college. He's going to MIT. And he's gonna follow that track that he did in the comic books. He's like super genius, but also like soldier. And I'm pretty sure at some point we're probably gonna get a movie where Peter Parker gets the symbiote and he gets it removed, and instead of it attaching to Brock, I think it's gonna go to Flash. I think that's the most logical direction to send it.
The way that looks like.
Because Tom Holland is still gonna know who Flash is, but Flash is gonna have no idea who he is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Overall, though, I think everything worked well for me. There's really nothing that stood out where I thought it was bad. Like I think the whole thing with me where I was surprised on was just the emotional arcs that they had,
Mhm.
and a lot of the how close to the story that Toby and Andrew were, and them offering their compelling moments. And even for Andrew, it was a very emotional film. I even think for Andrew, just in
Yeah,
those
dude.
like 30 minutes he was in the film, and a lot of the redemption that he went through. And like
I,
I would say he probably had the other most emotional arc in this
Yeah.
movie, which is crazy.
yeah, I think Andrew Garfield was a particular standout in this movie for me as
He
Spider-Man.
stole the show. What are you talking about?
For me,
to be
definitely.
honest,
He stole the
I actually
show.
think, yeah, when they're all together, all three Spider-Man are together, when all three Peter Parkers together, he is actually the most enjoyable one. He's
Also the most
human.
most humor, but he's the most like the comic book version of Peter
Exactly.
Parker.
Yeah, and that's another thing. What I was so happy about this is
He finally had good writing.
yeah. And I always tell people this when I talk about Spider-Man, and I hate to admit it, but I was like, if you want to be perfectly honest, if you just want to reduce it to the actor and the character of Peter Parker, Andrew Garfield has always been my favorite Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Mine too, honestly.
Tobey Maguire's is not. His movies are way better. I know that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man movies completely blow Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man movies out of the water, and even Tom Holland's two ones before this were quite a bit more. Yeah, awesome. Were quite a bit more entertaining. So as somebody who really always loved Andrew Garfield's version on the character, and the one who actually represents to me the version of Spider-Man that reminds me most of the comic books I read growing up about Spider-Man and Peter Parker, his version to me always felt the closest to me. And I think it was about damn time that they gave the best version of Peter Parker, in my opinion, the best version of movie that was actually worthy of that version of Peter Parker. And they gave him his own arc. And I felt like they had to make up for more than with Tobey Maguire's, because Tobey Maguire doesn't get as much of an arc in this one as Andrew Garfield does. Like, the writers were aware that Andrew Garfield had been done a little bit dirty in his franchise, and they kind of used this film to kind of like
To redeem
it and wrap up his storyline and give his Spider-Man more closure a little bit
Yeah,
more.
because with the Amazing Spider-Man 2, Andrew Garfield, they already knew it was supposed to be a trilogy. But once they got word that third one was canceled, I think they just put that's why we talked about, like, they put a little bit too much on Amazing Spider-Man, too much, but it was for that reason, because they knew they weren't gonna have a third, so they said might as well mess around with this one and see what we could do with it.
Yeah.
I even it was pretty funny and very meta that they had that whole interaction between Toby and Andrew on like, wow, you guys fought aliens? Like, man, I'm lame. Well, can we backtrack? You are amazing. You are the whole play on the whole Amazing Spider-Man. But because of a lot of the fan criticism of him looking at, oh yeah, Andrew Garfield sucked, or oh, Andrew's movie sucks, so he's a bad Spider-Man. It was kind of funny to have the OG Spider-Man, or the one that amongst fan opinion, when they think of Spider-Man, they see Toby say that you're amazing to Andrew. I felt like that was a very, very sweet, savory moment that I really enjoyed. And getting back to everything that Jimmy had said, if you just look at all of his interactions and all of his, like, a lot of his reactions, like even to like with Ruben, when you're like, oh yeah, he's in the background, like he's so engulfed in being Peter Parker and Spider-Man, like even just his reactions to certain things, I'm like, Jesus, this guy, like, if there were just a real life Peter Parker Spider-Man, it would be Andrew Garfield. Like, even everything that he did, and a lot of those moments, I thought it was really great that they redeemed this character and that there was a lot of emphasis on him. They knocked it out of the park, and I'm just so glad, because Andrew Garfield to me was Spider-Man, and every time I was always the one like, oh, you're lame, you hate. You think that Andrew Garfield was better than Toby? Like, you suck. Here. And I'm like, come on, look at this guy. Like,
same here.
Oh man, I'm really just great from the bottom of my heart that they went this route and wrote this character this way, and not enough can be said about it.
I'm happy for Andrew Garfield too, because one of the things I always felt bad for him about is that I always loved him as Spider-Man, and I was aware that's a dream role for him since childhood. He is a really, really big Spider-Man fan in real life. So I imagine it probably bothered you that you get the dream role and then you end up becoming the consensus least favorite, or what people think of as the worst, or coming out in the worst movies. So
I mean, Spider-Man 3. I think that's also another nod to that. Like, why Spider-Man 3? On Spider-Man 3? Like,
Yeah, Peter 3.
Oh yeah, that was
Peter
funny.
3.
Peter 3. I'm sorry, Spider-Man.
He's like, it was Peter 1, Peter 2.
And
Peter 3. Peter 3.
one of the most emotional moments is when he caught MJ.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Dude, that's where he avenged himself.
I got teared up at that moment because just like his acting and the way that he looked so happy and heartbroken at the same time. And it's the saddest Spider-Man, that's for sure. But
Yeah.
One of the standout moments in that movie is just him catching MJ. It was very emotionally satisfying and compelling.
What about because you touched on it too, Eric, that you felt he was the standout as far as the Spider-Man go. What is your reasons for that?
I mean, I think from the very beginning, just when he walked in through that portal, it was very clear how into his role he was and how like he's trying to prove almost that he's Peter, right, to MJ and Ned. From the very beginning, he's like, I'm Spider-Man, I'm Peter Parker, like trust me, believe me. And they have that whole interaction, and it's almost like kind of how you were saying, like he was always the third one. He throughout the movie, he's trying in his story arc in this movie, not even the previous two movies that he was in, he's trying to show and prove that he's Spider-Man and Peter Parker as much as Tom Holland's character is. And I always saw like Tobey Maguire's character, he came in and it was like seeing an old friend. I think going back to what you were saying, Jimmy.
That was funny.
Yeah, dude, because he comes in and he's not even wearing a Spider-Man outfit.
He's just casual.
Yeah, he's just
of course
in his youth pastor.
All casual too. Like he just walks in like, hey, what's up, guys? Like
I thought he came in and he didn't seem like he was gonna come in and be like the leader of the group or anything, but he came in and you could tell there was wisdom
he was
there.
The most knowledgeable, yeah.
There was wisdom there that both Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield were like listening to him, and he always had something to offer. And like you mentioned, the point where he's telling Andrew, like, you're amazing, like you need to believe that. And he has similar things to tell Tom Holland's character because he's gone through all of it. And you see Andrew Garfield's character, I think his character wasn't fleshed out enough in his movies where we got to see more of why he's a good Peter Parker in this one. And you see, like you were mentioning, Ruben, like there's little mannerisms in the back of the scene where he like looks over his shoulder or he does certain things certain ways that you're like, oh, that's definitely something Peter Parker would do. And so from beginning to end, I just thought it was really cool how his story arc played out, as opposed to like Tobey Maguire's, who it was almost like he's established himself as Peter Parker. He's very sure of who he is all throughout this film. He's just here to help, and very much so in the vein of the original Spider-Man films, and in that whole arc where he comes into his own and he's a full-fledged superhero without having to rely on anyone else but himself.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I like Tobey Maguire's role, but they gave him like the wise elder stoic Spider-Man, the one who didn't need another arc because his arc is pretty much, we already saw it.
We know it.
The sage, the elder Spider-Man who kind of like guided the other two. I thought that was like a good role, and I had to admit I started laughing when he started talking about his back. I was like,
yeah, exactly.
Tobey Maguire's pushing 50 years old now.
But you know what's crazy?
Yeah,
now that
crazy.
You know what's crazy now that you guys are talking about that, you mentioned to Eric about, you know, Toby being, well, we all knew Toby was going to be the oldest one, but about him coming in casual and all that stuff, I love it because they're paying homage to his films, you know, because what did he always have under his casual clothes? He was always ready. He was always suited up, basically.
He was always ready.
So I always love it. So he still did that. They paid homage to that. And then there was something else I was gonna say, but I kind of completely forgot.
There's one thing that bothered me about Tobey Maguire's character and his arc.
It's because he's old, huh?
No, dude. I legit thought he was gonna die at the end when he got stabbed.
So did I.
And I know there were reshoots in this movie. They did reshoots for the Spider-Man movie. I wonder if he was originally supposed to die. Because like they stabbed him, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, like where's this going? Okay, maybe Osborn's gonna die and he's gonna die, and it's kind of like completing his story. I was like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden he just brushes it off like, I've been stabbed before. And that was kind of like, okay, that's weird.
Look, I think it's because there might have been reshoots. Like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if he was originally meant to die. But I can imagine why, because the theater I was in, I'm not sure if you guys had the same reaction when he got stabbed. There was nothing but gasps the whole
Yes.
theater.
I thought he was gonna die too.
Yeah.
One guy, like, who was like sitting like a couple rows ahead and to the left of me shouted out, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
He was so upset and so angry, and I got this sense of tension in the theater. It's like, oh shit, I think they just pissed off a lot of fans right now.
Mhm.
So I think that was them. I wish they had the balls to go a little bit further. Like,
Yeah.
and I think it would have hurt a little bit more. And obviously people don't want to see that, but for the purposes of storytelling, it would have been right.
Exactly.
Yeah, because he stopped Tom Holland from taking that step.
Yeah.
Right. And he was there to not allow him to go there. And man, I don't know. I thought that would have been like the cherry on top.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like, yes, I don't want him to die, but as far as the storytelling goes, like you said, that would have been good if they went through with it. I'm sure in pre-screening tests it didn't go well, and that's why they changed it.
I was thinking about what then happened in that scene. I was like, what happened to your Spidey sense? But I think they were paying homage to the first film. Well, remember, he was supposed to get stabbed in the back by the Green Goblin glider, but it freaking didn't happen. So I felt like this was one of those things where, like, this is what would have happened, or some way, somehow in the other film, but he still survived. I thought he was gonna die, to be honest. I was like, no way, like what? Like, see, and I thought that was gonna be another focal point where I thought, like, dang, he's seen the Spider-Man about to die, so that's where he's gonna really take his responsibility to the next level. Oh, and now I remember what I was gonna say about Maguire's freaking, casual look and all that. Kind of reminded me of Into the Spider-Verse, where the older freaking Spider-Man
with his sweatpants.
Oh,
just had his sweatpants and just his coat, but he still had the Spider-Man thing on it. I was like, oh man, they're playing the older Tobey Maguire like he just doesn't care.
It's funny.
What about you, Ruben? Which Spider-Man was a standout for you? I don't know if you specifically stated.
Well, overall, like I said, I'll still stick to my Tom Holland. I feel like him just being the teenager, I feel like he's my Spider-Man, but I do agree with you guys about being overall Andrew Garfield, like when it comes to just being the superhero and the teenager, he plays it perfectly. But
there's a petition now to get Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man 3 going again.
It might honestly.
I don't know about the whole petition thing, but I was gonna bring that up too. Also, supposedly Maguire is definitely not gonna have his own solo film, but there are chances that he can make cameos in future films. But there is a chance that Andrew Garfield could have his own solo film.
I feel like Tobey Maguire.
I just read that this morning somewhere. I forget where.
Look, Tobey Maguire is kind of looking his age. You could tell that the years have passed when he first.
He could be the mentor, bro.
Yeah, I was like, he's cool, but like, I think I could see him coming back as Spider-Man, but only in Spider-Verse or multiverse scenarios. Like
Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness.
I could see it, and you know what?
Directed by Sam Raimi.
Sam Raimi.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, Michael Keaton was caught on the set of that, and they weren't supposed to leak that. That's the Vulture. So I wouldn't be surprised what they do with that. So I could see Tobey Maguire coming back, but only in like these
limited capacity.
Like a Nick Fury kind of role where he just makes sporadic appearances here and there. Because given that he's almost 50 and he's looking his age, I don't really think they're going to be wanting to do a solo film, but fans are going to be wanting to see him in it for the indefinite future going forward because, he's the OG Spider-Man. It'd be just really cool to see him pop up, Peter, this is what we do, reassuring that point and everything. And I think he's deserved it, honestly.
Yeah. And I was going to say, there's actually rumors now because of how well this movie has done with these cameos that there's been reshoots started for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness to add more cameos.
Yeah, and they're already done reshooting everything they were going to reshoot, though.
I hope, though, that it's more than just cameos, because to me, these were not cameos. They actually came on, and they were a significant part of the story.
Yes.
And they got
exactly.
I think that's what made it work.
These are not cameos.
Yeah, if it were just a cameo where they just popped up just so fans could scream and get excited for a moment and then fade away, that would have really bothered me. So that's the only thing I hope for Doctor Strange with and I don't like that they're making Sam Raimi do reshoots because Sam Raimi is such a talented filmmaker. I'm pretty sure.
I think he decided on it, to be honest.
Oh, he decided? Okay.
I think he decided on it.
Okay. That's fair enough. One thing more thing I want to say about having all three versions of Spider-Man that we've had in live action is that each one brings their own flavor to Spider-Man, and each one feels like Spider-Man. However, like I said, I think Andrew Garfield's the most accurate, but I feel like each one has an aspect that's part of the comic books that the other doesn't have. So none of the three Spider-Mans individually encompass everything Spider-Man is in the comics. But all three of them all together with their three different portrayals pretty much encompass everything Spider-Man has been by having all three. It feels very like a very complete view of who that character is in the comic by putting each version in that each brings their own aspects to the character that make it special. But yeah, all three of them together have everything that Spider-Man has always been in the comics to me.
Yeah.
Definitely. Let's talk about the villains now. Who was a standout for you? It should be obvious who's a standout, and were there any weak links or anything you didn't like about the villains in general?
I'll start off with the weak link just so we can get into the positive stuff. I felt like the Sandman's
you read my mind.
Felt forced.
Well,
it was
the actor couldn't be there, first of all. That actor wasn't able to be there for the shoots. So everything he did was actually like recordings in a studio. Well, did you notice that the scene where he loses his sand power is exactly from the movie, the previous Spider-Man movie?
Yeah,
that looks like a composite shot from.
Yeah, I was like, bro,
it's literally they just changed the background, but it's the exact same scene.
It was weird to me. I'm like,
hand.
why is he always in his sand form? Like, should he like in the movie? Anytime he wasn't fighting, like he was in just his regular human form. Like, why is he always in the sand form? Is what I wondered.
Yeah, they made it seem in this one like he was stuck in that form, but it was like I recall he was able to go.
He could switch back.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I was not aware that he was not on set, and now thinking back on it, it's glaringly obvious that we have to do the CGI sand thing because it's not actually here. So it's how we treat the audience. And the thing is, I'm not a fan of Spider-Man 3, but I think that he was a good Sandman, a good Flint Marko, and I think that it was a chance for them to like do him a little bit better. And I felt like that was a missed opportunity. Like I was like, I don't have anything against him being there, but if you were gonna bring him back, you should have like brought him back. He was there with all the villains, and yet at the same time, even though he was amongst all of them there, he barely felt present. Like there was this weird feeling where I was like, he's there, but he's not really there. It's really about the other four guys.
The most present he felt, and I was so excited because I really like the Sandman, is when he shows up to help Tom Holland at near the beginning of the movie. He shows up and he's helping him.
Electro.
And I was like, all right, he's coming in not as a villain but to help him out. And he just switches super quickly.
Just because he's like, hey, what did you do
Tom
to
Holland,
him?
He's like, what you do to Electro? Where'd you send him? Did you kill him?
I actually think it would have been a lot more interesting or more compelling if he would have went the route where he was trying to help him too.
Yeah.
It would have given
it only made sense because of where he was at in his arc at the end of Spider-Man 3. It only made sense. I thought that's where the route he was going to go, was still being that same character.
And he's the only one that didn't die out of all of them.
Let's acknowledge that arc and like make it seem like it, and then forget it in a split second and just undo it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I feel like they only put Sandman in this movie because he was the only, like I said, he was the only one that didn't die in the movies, and he was the only actual proof that guys, you guys did die. You two guys did die, because Dr. Octopus didn't believe it. Octavio didn't it was like, nah, bro, you did die. So it's like. And then for the other two, that's a whole different story. So it was a lot of effort put into this film, no matter.
But I agree, Jimmy. I agree. He was kind of the low point as far as the villains go.
I agree with you. Yeah, same reasons that you said. I was like, because I was questioning the whole thing. Like I said, I'll repeat myself. Like, why aren't you transferring back to your regular form and all that? Like, what the heck?
Yeah. What about you, Nick? You haven't said.
Probably the Lizard, because at least with Sandman, you at least had that little interaction with Peter I was gonna say Eiffel Tower in the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
But I mean, it made even more sense that he wasn't personally there on set, Thomas Hayden Church, because I was expecting like him to say something or him to be like, okay, Peter, you're right. Like, let's go home, or okay, well, I'll be here waiting. But with the lizard, like as soon as he got turned back into his human form, as soon as he was cured, he didn't have any interaction with Andrew. He was just like sitting up there freaking freezing because he was naked. Yeah. And you at least had an interaction with Electro and Andrew Garfield. I at least thought they would have been that, because they were at least friends and they actually had a personal connection to each other. I was really hoping to see some kind of interaction between him and Andrew Garfield, but also to him in that same vein where he just felt like a background character and just there to kind of fit that grand scope of having to have another villain from the Amazing Spider-Man verse, and we weren't going to have the Green Goblin. So I think for me, just because I know that's a great actor, I really like that character, but it just felt a little bit underwhelming, which is understandable because there's so many characters in this.
I think it must be hard when you're writing this to try to give them all equal space and everything, and the real reality is that you can't. So I think it just ended up concentrating mostly on the Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and Electro.
Well, Dad, I don't know if you know, but Willem Dafoe said that, hey, man, if I'm be in this movie, I want to be doing my own action. I want to have no cameos.
He wanted more than a cameo.
He's like,
I think
before he even saw a script, that's what he told them.
And he's the main antagonist too. So it's like
at 66 years old too.
At 66, doing his own stunts, that's badass.
So let's talk about him. Like, he's the standout of easily with the villains. I mean, he's the main villain. But what in general makes him to stand out to you, or what stood out to you guys about it?
Damn, the intense ass freaking Spidey sense that freaking Tom Holland had, dude. That was like, I was like, bro, you having a shroom trip or something? Or like, bro, like he was even sweating and all that. I was like,
I think
bro, what's going on that's making you like trip out this much? And that was his Spidey sense, bro. And I think that's what stood out to me the most and I think Green Goblin, other than when he, throws the goblin bomb at Aunt May and all that, I'm like, damn.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was actually gonna do a callback to one of our previous episodes where we compared the Green Goblin to the Joker, and I remember on that one I was defending the Green Goblin like from the very beginning because of his relationship with Peter Parker. And I think from the very beginning when you saw Osborn in Feast, and where you could tell that he was like lost and he didn't know what to do, and he came to Tom Holland and his Peter Parker, and I think that was just very honest, right? Where he was looking for help and he was even pushing Peter Parker to help, but then he switches, and it's believable because that's who his character is. And the fact that Willem Dafoe is able to do that so quickly also. And it's very in line with that character in the comic books.
Heck yeah.
And so it was perfect, and just the amount of chaos he creates, and like he pushes them to the brink. He kills essentially Aunt May. He's the one that destroys the like gauntlet that has the curse in it. Like he was the main point of chaos throughout this whole movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he was like a mirror for Peter. And it's like, this is where my responsibility lies. And I'm trying to have it all. But now that Green Goblin is here, I can't have it all. It's impossible. Yep. He's not letting me do that.
But
he's not letting me. Yeah. And I think that's why his character was so important, because he's not just there to just be a villain and he hates Peter like the other ones. He's just there to push Peter to the brink of killing him. He really was. And it's very in line with I guess calling back, it reminded me a lot of the Joker in The Killing Joke, where he's pushing Batman to kill him. And I mean, down to like the laugh and everything, but I think he just perfectly showed why the Green Goblin is Spider-Man's greatest enemy.
And why, I agree with you on that, bro. For sure.
I got to say, I mean, I have a couple things to say. I mean, I want to expound on that, but before I get to that, I want to say Willem Dafoe is one of the greatest actors who have ever lived, one of the greatest actors who has ever been on screen. He is fucking fantastic. I love Willem Dafoe. Like, he never fails to blow me away no matter what he does. And I was so happy, like what Ruben said when I had read about it, where he said it was important to him. He's like, is this going to be a power cameo? That's how he described it, a power cameo. He says it was very important. It's like, if I'm going to do this character again, I have to actually do the character. And I actually think he topped his performance in the original Spider-Man. I think he was even scarier and more intense.
Easily,
more
yep.
menacing this
For
time.
sure.
And I think one of the things that they did, and which was one of the smartest moves that they did for this movie, is they broke his fucking they broke his mask.
Yep.
That big bulky thing. And a lot of people had said this at the time. One of the things that was a missed opportunity with Willem Dafoe in the original Spider-Man, as great as he was, is what made him such a great casting choice is his face. He has the perfect face for a villain like the Green Goblin, the way that his face almost seems carved in, the lines and everything. And he didn't get a chance to like act like fully when he was the Green Goblin because he was hiding behind
He had a mask.
so
Yeah.
you kind of robbed that great actor of a little bit of the performance by doing that, by getting rid of that, so you could see his facial expressions, you could see his facial reactions. You could tell instantly when he goes from Norman to the Green Goblin just by the way his face subtly changes, the cackling that he does. Like, he was so much more menacing this time around. He had his little Joker Batman moment too, where Tom Holland is just smacking
Yeah.
in the face. And all he's doing is
He's laughing.
and laughing.
Yep.
Like, holy shit, that was such an intense moment. But it feels like Willem Dafoe came into this movie with something to prove. Like, he wanted
He already knew what he wanted, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like he's as good as this movie is because Willem Dafoe pushed them to make sure that if I'm going to be the Green Goblin, I'm going to be the Green Goblin. Then they finally gave him the classic Green Goblin look, which you've never seen before.
The hoodie look.
Yeah. And he is his arch nemesis. And they made something work that in theory to me should not work in this movie. Is that's his most dangerous villain. But Norman Osborn doesn't really exist in Tom Holland's universe. I mean, he's crossing over into it. To me, that almost sounds like a Batman universe where the Joker doesn't exist and he crashes through to another universe, and it doesn't sound right. But the way that he was used in the story and the way that he pushed Peter, even though it wasn't a Green Goblin from his universe, it still felt true to the comics. Like, he was still battling his greatest villain and his greatest threat and his arch nemesis, despite it being a Green Goblin from a universe outside of his own. It still felt naturalistic enough, and I love that he was the main villain, and they made it work. Something that I just did not like was the idea of no Green Goblin existing in this universe, at least specific to that universe, and they made it work in this one. And Willem Dafoe, MVP to me, movie. Just, he blew me away. He's such an intense villain. It's one of the top performances in this movie specifically of any comic book villain ever. One of the best acting performances.
Definitely. What about you, Ruben? Was Willem Dafoe the standout to you?
Yeah, well, it would have to be, other than Doc Ock when he wants to just help, Spidey. But yeah, it would have to be Green Goblin because obviously he was the one that was more deceitful. But it was crazy that, how Willem Dafoe, we just saw, Norman Osborn for regular self for the beginning of the movie when he first gets introduced. And then we don't see him again until after the fact where, Green Goblin gets injected and all that. But it would have to be the Green Goblin, and for all the reasons that Jimmy said.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such an intense performance.
I mean, I think the best acting he had done, and the true example of villainy to the core and villainy to the heart, was when he was stealing those donuts behind the back of Aunt May and Peter.
Dude,
like that, I'm like, oh, that's the Green Goblin is still there. He made me trying to act all deceitful and all cunning, and I'm Norman, but that's the Green Goblin. I'm like, no, that's a villain right there. Like hiding the remote from your dad when you were a kid. That's just villainy at its core.
I agree.
But for me, it was just really refreshing to see Willem Dafoe again. Like, I've been a huge fan of Willem Dafoe. It's cool. It's funny too because he was obviously in the Raimi-verse. Now he's in the MCU. He's in the DCEU. It's just so crazy that an actor of that caliber can just jump around. John Wick also. This guy is such a talented actor. Like, anything he does, people are like, yes, let Willem Dafoe do. I mean, there were even talks of him a while back becoming the Joker because he had a very strong resemblance to the Arkham version of Joker. The Arkham games version.
Let's be honest, Willem Dafoe would make a fantastic Joker.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that laugh alone definitely sounds very Jokerish. And even just with what Eric said, like that, just that flip of the switch and him just being able to go and channel the Green Goblin like right away on the you think you know, you think you have it all, and just like that able to channel that right away, man. It not too many actors can do that. To just go from compelling, conniving, and modesty to that, it's just so great. And I even think that fact of him trying to push Peter to the edge and pushing him to that rage, and you're just gonna send me back? No, I'm gonna kill you. Attaboy. Like all of that. Him realizing himself, okay, there's a Peter here. I might as well terrorize him, make his life hell, like I did to Peter in my universe. We all knew that he was going to be the main villain. Once it was announced that he was coming back, there's nobody else who could be the main villain besides Willem Dafoe. Like,
didn't the advertising and like the marketing campaign make Doc Ock look like the main villain?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
They kind of did, but we knew when he was coming back, we knew that he was going to be the main villain for sure,
or at least steal the show.
I didn't know. I knew he was going to be a big part, but because of the trailers, it seems like Alfred Molina is getting like the promotion on this, so I'm guessing he's going to be like the primary antagonist. He's the one you see more in the trailers. They only tease the Green Goblin in the trailers. They don't really like full on show him like being the Green Goblin and doing Green Goblin things the way that Doc Ock is shown. So I was kind of surprised they did.
Yeah, I think for me the reason
Molina was a significant character, but he was not the primary antagonist of this movie.
I think for me, the reason I knew that wasn't going to be the case was just because that's the character who's not villainous to his core. I mean, technically you could say the same thing about Norman, but because of the Goblin formula, he has that split personality, and it's not really hard to distinguish, or not really easy to distinguish if he's being honest or not, or if he's really even truly Norman anymore. But because of where he was in his redemption at the end of Spider-Man 2, I already knew for sure this guy is not going to be the main villain. Or in the way there was a part in the trailer where it looked like him and Elektra were fighting, where like he falls off the building. So I'm like, I'm assuming that he's gonna go back to how he was at the end of Spider-Man 2. At least for me.
That's what I was gonna say.
That,
I'm glad you brought that up, Nick, because I was about to say that. I mean, I don't know if y'all recall, but yeah, once he got shocked by Elektra and fell off the building, that was it. There was no more show of him. But what I want to say is, like, what happened in the beginning? Why was he villainous? Because his thing fried, right? Once he got shocked by Electro, what do you think happened to that chip? It got fried again. So I feel like he's just going to go back to his villainous ways once he goes back.
And it was touching upon, like, Alfred Molina and Tobey Maguire. It was really cool that they had their little interaction moment. You had that's the original Spider-Man score by Danny Elfman pop up, too.
Yep.
That was so cool.
Oh, yeah. You heard it right when they were on the bridge.
Yeah.
I remember I got so excited because I started feeling like I started hearing, I was like, that's the Danny Elfman score. And I kind of like popped up in my seat and I was like, okay. I mean, we already knew that bridge scene was going to have Doc Ock.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously, it wasn't a surprise. Regardless, just putting the music right there at that moment was enough to like perk me up and like widen. I was like, oh shit, I know what's coming right now. Very exciting.
Yeah, I also wanted, since we're talking about the villains, can we talk about how self-aware this movie is, especially when it comes to like memes? Like the fact that Osborn comes out and says, I'm somewhat of a scientist myself. I was like, really? Did he really just say that? Or I think Ruben did it earlier, the whole part when they're on the Statue of Liberty and they're talking because they can't work as a team. They legit point at each other.
Yeah.
Like all three of them, they just pointed at each other.
They did that also in the lab.
Did in the lab.
When Ned says Peter, they're like, oh, me, and then like they did this very quickly.
Yeah.
So that was the first indication I had of that.
I think it's very self-aware of what they were doing, right?
I think it's weird how meme culture has made such a stronghold on things. Because I'm going to bring those two examples, and then I'll bring in another example from a different movie.
Yeah.
But that line, I'm something of a scientist myself. I know that's like a classic line, But these days in pop culture, it's primarily a classic line because of memes, not because of the movie, because the internet took it over and made it a thing. So when you hear that, you think the meme. You're not thinking of, it doesn't feel like a callback to the OG Spider-Man. It feels like a callback
because of a meme.
And they do it again twice with the pointing thing. And when they had first dropped the Justice League trailer, even though they didn't use it for Zack Snyder's Justice League, they had in the trailer Jared Leto as the Joker saying, "We live in a society," which is not something he's ever done. It's only a meme thing for him to like say, "We live in a society." It just shows you, I'm like, wow, meme culture has really got a strong hold on stuff.
Exactly. Well, even just going back to, I think Eric or Ruben talked about that, but the whole "my back."
Yeah.
In my head, I immediately thought of my back. I started busting up, and everyone's like, "Why are you laughing?" I'm like, "Spider-Man 2, when he fell and hit the car, my back."
Yeah.
It's also another joke. I don't know if you guys were aware of this, but between Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, when Tobey Maguire did Seabiscuit, he actually had an injury with his back. And there were rumors and stories going around Hollywood because they didn't know how.
That he wasn't gonna reprise his role supposedly.
Jake Gyllenhaal was actually gonna be replacing him, or was in line to replace him.
Yeah. Mysterio was going to replace him. Yeah. But
so that's how that scene started. It started off as a joke because he suffered a back injury during Seabiscuit. So that was like kind of a parody of that.
Yeah, so they've even put the joke of that into Spider-Man 2. But
something really cool about this movie, what it did, and this isn't actually related to any of the Spider-Man characters, but I was really appreciative and I really loved seeing how different Doctor Strange was from the very beginning when we first saw him in Doctor Strange till now. You see that arc, and there's so much growth and so much understanding and so much more compassion and empathy this character has developed for other people, and a lot of those selfish traits aren't really there anymore. And I thought it was a little funny that they had said that he was going to become like another somewhat mentor type. I mean, we'll see how exactly that's going to develop or what's going to be done with that, because obviously the ending of this movie. But I found it kind of funny because he's the most similar to Iron Man in the MCU, being that they both started off as asshole, unsympathetic characters, egotistical, and had a tragic accident that changed them and that compelled them to become better people and understanding what sacrifices are and the whole universe, multiverse at play. I really thought that, I really appreciate it, and that really goes to show like these are the same characters that are developing and are going through arcs movie by movie, and crazy to see like from the very beginning where they started till now. So I really was really cool to see Strange in a different light, even though he retained a lot of his a-hole mannerisms, but was still a better person overall.
Yeah, it's crazy because it did sound like he sounded like an a-hole, but in reality he just had that knowledge and that experience and wisdom where it's like, nah, Peter, you shouldn't be doing this, bro. And it even showed in the movie, like, you're gonna tell me that you're about to make me, wipe out the memory of the whole world without you actually calling the college to stay, to make your case. Like, I thought that was another example of how, Peter wasn't fully grown into his character yet.
Well, and he says that too. He chastises him right before that, and then he says, just given everything we've been through, a lot of times I forget that you're just a kid.
You're a teenager, you're just a kid.
So even though he was getting mad, he still had that self-realization to be like, you know what, you're just a kid, you're going through the cycles, I get it. And even you really see him get emotional as he tells him to say his goodbyes, and then a tear streaming down his face.
So at the end, before he says it, he says like, "Well, goodbye, kid," or "I'll miss you, kid," or something like that.
I mean,
right?
did you catch that he tells him he loves him, right?
Yeah, he does.
He straight up says like, everyone that you love is gonna forget who you are, and he's like, we will never know who you are.
Yeah, like that.
So he implies that he loves him, and it's so emotional. I think. I was really worried. About Doctor Strange because from the trailers alone, I was like, man, is he really gonna go back to just like thinking he can do anything and get away with anything? But I think they played it out very well. I think Doctor Strange was still aware of the limits of what was happening, of what he could do and what he was doing, and he was trying to stop it. I think he's not necessarily an antagonist, but he was a clear like juxtaposition of a hero next to Spider-Man who was trying to do something differently. He was trying to send everyone back to the universe, and Spider-Man, which is now very in line with Peter Parker in the comic books, didn't press that button. And I think the fact that Doctor Strange set that up for him, and Spider-Man just Peter Parker refused to hit that button throughout the movie, shows his growth now at the end of the movie. Literally, the whole movie could have been stopped with a push of a button, literally.
Yeah.
But the fact that he didn't take that route is what creates the like better Peter Parker now for the MCU. And
Exactly.
But what's good about that is it doesn't make Doctor Strangelove seem like he was doing something bad.
exactly,
They both have valid points. Like they may disagree
Yeah.
on how to handle the situation, but it doesn't make Doctor Strange seem less heroic because
and that's the thing too. I think because that whole he's thinking on the multiverse aspect, like the multiverse
Yes.
can be shattered and thrown into shambles, and so much disarray and crazy stuff we don't understand or comprehend could happen. But obviously, because Spider-Man, Peter is that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, he thinks on that ground level. He's thinking, well, what is going to happen to this specific person? And Strange's like, well, I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the multiverse as a whole. So I think that's a good thing too. It doesn't undermine his arc and his growth as a person compared to what Peter's thinking. Like they're both valid in their own ways, and they both make a lot of sense.
I mean, there's different types of heroism.
Exactly.
Everybody has a different approach depending on who you are as a person.
And I think a lot of it was also a callback to Infinity War when they're on the ship, and he says, when it comes down to it, if it's between this Infinity Gem and the kid, I'm going to choose the gem. When he says that to Tony Stark,
well, he says you are the kid. When it comes to you and the kid, I'm picking the stone.
I'm picking the stone. Yeah, and I think that comes full circle here because at the end he's trying his best to help Peter Parker, but at the end, it's almost he's reluctant to forget him.
Yeah.
Even at the cost of the world, because he has his own little bit of growth in this movie as well, where Peter Parker gives him the solution and says, just make everyone forget who Peter Parker is. He's hesitant.
Yeah.
Where at the beginning of the movie, he would have been like, yeah, okay, let's do it. Like it's for the greater good. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting too, how their relationship comes full circle. And it's really neat to see.
Yeah, and it really hints at the things at play, because obviously we know Doctor Strange is going to become the next, obviously, he's been important from the very beginning, but he's going to obviously be around long term for a lot of years to come, and there's a lot that they're going to be doing with him. And I even, touching upon those whole, like, Iron Man, Doctor Strange similarities, you even have at the very end, Doctor Strange will return, and the first thing I thought of was Iron Man, like in Iron Man 3 with the Iron Man will return. I was like, oh wow, they're really self-aware. I was like, this film is just so, it's crazy how self-aware this film is on a meta level.
They did that in Civil War too. At the end of Civil War, Spider-Man will return.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, Doctor Strange isn't even the Sorcerer Supreme in this movie either.
Yep.
I thought that was funny.
That was cool.
He got out of technicality.
That's funny.
Yeah, you got it in the technicality. That's so funny, dude.
Let's talk about the post-credit scene, that first one, because it struck me as very odd, and it didn't line up with what Venom Let There Be Carnage, what that was hinting at. Was there, like, from what I had heard, there was some kind of there wasn't really strong communication between Sony and the MCU about when Sony filmed Let There Be Carnage, because the way it hints is that he's going to be there for the future, and like he's going to be permanently in that, like the universe is blended or mended, or he's now transferred permanently there. But obviously we see in this one that wasn't the case, and he got transferred back to his own universe. So do you guys, did that kind of strike you guys as odd?
I think that was planned. I think the whole point is just to leave the Venom symbiote there. That was the whole point to it from the beginning. Because
they had said that they're going to have Eddie or Tom Hardy and Tom Holland are going to face off against each other. So the way that this film ends, it more seems that Flash is going to become Venom, Agent Venom. So that's why it struck me as odd.
But let's not forget that with the whole multiverse, people, even though the Peter Parkers look different, there might be, people that look alike, and who knows, Eddie Brock is probably in Tom Holland's universe,
a variant,
a reporter, but he just doesn't have the Venom yet, and he might hit that same bar for vacation on Mexico, and then might be stranded along there, or who knows. But I still believe it could be the same Tom Hardy and Tom Holland that fight off in the future.
See, I was thinking about, I guess it's going back to the spell that was done, right? Where like everyone that knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man started to come over. but then Venom comes over.
Exactly.
So I mean, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking maybe because they touch on this in Venom too, the symbiote hive mind, where they kind of share information. In the comic books, the hive mind is never like, it doesn't cross universes, that hive mind. But if a Venom from one universe crosses into another universe, it is connected to the hive mind of that universe. I wonder if in these movies the hive mind is almost like connected through universes, and that's why it was pulled over.
It could
because the hive mind, maybe the Venom in the MCU or the hive mind in the MCU knows that, or I guess
Peter is Spider-Man.
No, it would have been the Venom in Tobey Maguire's movie knows that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, and it somehow communicates to this Venom that that's the case. So that's why he gets pulled into the MCU. Yeah, but like you said, like it almost seemed like there was a disconnect there, because I started thinking about that after the movie. I was like, wait, why was Venom even there in the first place? Because you clearly see he has no idea who Spider-Man is.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, let's go to New York and talk to this guy. Like, but maybe Venom knew. But and you see it at the end of Venom when you see the whole after credit scene where Venom like licks the TV and is like, okay, he obviously has some connection to Spider-Man
That's
now.
right, yeah.
And it was just really weird. So I have no idea where they're going with it. And
the rumor was that there was no...
They're still figuring it out themselves. I'm pretty sure the studio is still figuring it out themselves. Like, we'll figure it out somehow. We'll get to it.
But you know what's funny about the end credit? Where he's just like, so you're going to tell me there's, a group of superheroes, there's a Hulk? And then Venom's like, the Protector was a stupid name.
That's funny.
Yeah. In my opinion, this was probably one of the worst after credit scenes I've seen.
It made no sense. Yeah,
but it was still worthy of a laugh. I'll tell you that.
Or
at least connect the universes some way, somehow.
Yeah. See, that's the weird thing, is that I think that there's a good handful of strange little flaws in this movie like that, where I don't think of this as like, oh, it's not perfect, but it's one where like the emotional journey that it went through meant so much to me. It felt like it was connecting. I was revisiting parts of my childhood, like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans remind me so much of being a little kid. I have very fond memories of my dad and my grandfather, who are no longer around, taking me to see that movie with my cousin, and like being blown away by it. And my connection to Spider-Man over the years, my feelings about Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, how I've always wanted to see like a Spider-Verse thing. It does so much right, and it's so emotionally satisfying. And I don't like admitting it, but it actually made me cry at several points of the movie. It really, really touched a lot of like nerves, and it's my favorite MCU film because it took my favorite Marvel character and made what I view as just like a complete tribute to Spider-Man. Really beautiful. It also feels like a movie that I dreamt I saw, not a movie that I actually see.
Exactly.
It feels like a movie that shouldn't even exist. It's like something you wake up from a dream from. It's like, yeah, I dreamt I went to go see the new Spider-Man movie, and Tobey Maguire was there, and the Green Goblin, and Doc Ock. That's not it.
Andrew Garfield.
Also Andrew Garfield and Electro. It doesn't even seem real. Like, I still had time, like, seeing them all on screen. There are times when my mind was watching, I was like, how is this actually a thing? Like, this seems like it shouldn't even exist. And I think the fact that it shouldn't exist, but it does, is so cool to me. It's so exciting. It's such a strange experience.
It's so crazy that we had that awesome scene where they were coordinating their plans, and the whole like, the Avengers, that's great, what is that? And then him trying to explain, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Then that, you have Andrew Garfield saying, I love you guys, and then they all like dive off of the building. You have Andrew doing his infamous woo, and I think they even like did like they were webbing towards each other and pulling each other. And that shot where they all land together one by one on the Statue of Liberty, like that's got to be my favorite fanboy moment in a comic book movie ever. Even with everything taken into fact, knowing that I was such a big fan of Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, and loved every iteration of Spider-Man in the films, like that's without a doubt got to be my favorite fanboy comic book moment in a live action movie. Like, bro, there's nothing that's gonna top it.
Until we see Miles Morales come in a live action.
I mean, they hint at that when
Jamie Foxx.
I gotta admit, Andrew Garfield line is funny when he says, I thought you would be black, and Andrew Garfield's like, I'm sorry, Like he looks
Yeah.
sorry that he's not.
Yeah, he had
sorry
the
that he's
most
not.
like funny sublime mode, like
Oh, so Spider-Man.
oh man, he had
Yep.
But
like
he's
you
like,
can
there has
tell
to be
Andrew
some.
Garfield enjoyed himself record. Well, I hope he enjoyed himself recording that, but in the movie it looks like he had fun for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
dude.
And Jamie Foxx is like, there has to be a black Spider-Man out there somewhere. And I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure
dude.
in your theater, some of the people in the audience kind of you could hear like shuffling, like
Mumbling. Yeah.
All the little kids in their Miles Morales costumes and all that.
Yeah.
Miles, come on.
So overall, I rate this movie infinity out of 10.
Oh yeah.
Oh wait,
that's how I was trying to
that
say
might not
it.
be the correct. That might not be correct though, because Infinity War, I give it a million, 2 trillion, a trillion, a jillion
Nothing
out of
but
10.
Infinity. I feel you.
Whatever is the closest number to infinity because of the Infinity War. Yeah, I don't know that that's fair. So
Yeah.
What about you guys?
Yeah, man, I gotta agree with you. It's like that's what I was trying to say earlier. Like, you know, where I was trying to find the flaws that would make me, you know, kill a number or half a number or something. And like Jimmy said, like there probably were, but like those were thrown out the window because that's how great of a movie is. And yeah, man, it's a 10 out of 10 for me.
What about you, Eric?
I have it at a 9 out of 10. It's not perfect. I have my favorite superhero film is still Logan at the top. My favorite MCU film is still Guardians of the Galaxy. I do have to watch this movie a few more times, given that I've watched Logan and Guardians like maybe 20 times each already. But as of now, I have it as a 9 out of 10. I would definitely watch it again. I recommend it to everyone. And
sure.
I'm very excited about what they set up for the future of the MCU, for the future of Peter Parker, even for the future of Doctor Strange, which is the immediate future, right? That movie's going to come out next year. So I'm really, it brings a lot of excitement, and I think they just did this character super well. I do think this trilogy now competes with the Dark Knight trilogy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So that I'm still, like I said, I still need to watch this movie a few more times, but that I have it up there
after the second time watch.
Maybe it doesn't hit the top for me yet, but I need to rewatch it a few more times.
The only thing I'm going to say about the Dark Knight trilogy and why that's hard for me to top, aside from me being the fucking Batman fanatic that I am, I actually feel that what makes those a little bit hard to compete with is that most of these other trilogies, like Captain America had a good trilogy and Spider-Man is having a great trilogy. The only thing that I think would give this the Dark Knight trilogy an edge as a trilogy is the fact that they all operate within their own universe. You just need to see those 3 films, get everything. Yeah. These other trilogies do require a little bit of homework and pull in storylines from things outside of it. So there's like a self-contained trilogy. I think for me, the Dark Knight trilogy is kind of hard to top.
Yeah, you got to blame the old Spider-Man movies for that.
Yeah.
Though.
But
and you touched upon something, Jimmy, that I do feel like is the biggest flaw with this film, is that you have to be a fan or at least have an understanding and awareness of the previous films, like, of the previous franchises. Like, if you don't know who Tobey Maguire is, if you don't know who Andrew Garfield is, then it's not gonna pack that same punch.
Like, I even think that The Dark Knight is a great film removed from Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
You have to see either of those to get like a full story out of it. I would not tell people to skip Batman Begins. Don't do that. But I think you could appreciate The Dark Knight without having even seen
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Because even though I ranked this movie very high and I loved it, I don't know if I would really compare this to other comic book movies like The Dark Knight, like Batman 89, like Superman 78. Just because that fact, like it's very unfair to compare this film to that. Like, people are going to say, oh, well, this film is way better because it has Andrew Garfield, it has Tobey Maguire, it has Alfred Molina, all of that. Like, as far as, like, I would more compare it to something like Infinity War, something where it's standing on it, where it's in its own league, essentially. Like, it's great, don't get me wrong, but it's really hard to judge it. Like, even compared to Logan, I don't know if you can exactly accurately judge and compare those kind of movies together.
The reason I start comparing them now is because, especially, I think this movie is a perfect example now that the superhero genre is in essence its own genre now. It really has become that. where people are gonna like they don't just say I'm gonna go watch an action movie. I'm gonna go watch a superhero movie. And for what it's worth, I think that's why I continue to compare superhero movies, because I take the comics that I've read in the past and how they choose to show those characters. So and that's why I compared it to Logan as well, because I mean you saw Wolverine and X-Men and different iterations of X-Men, and I enjoyed that movie so much, and I thought that was a perfect arc and ending to a character for me, and that's why I compared this movie to that, because for me, like all superhero now movies and genres, they have to have an arc of the character. It has to be building the character and pointing towards something else. And for the most part, right, most superhero movies are going to go in that direction. You can argue that there's other movies like Watchmen, which are more of a talking about the world that we live in now. But in general, when we're speaking superhero movies, that's what I'm looking at, the character arc itself. And that's why I have Logan at the top. But I mean, this is up there. Yeah. And obviously Dark Knight's going to be up there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to make sure we end this on a great.
Jimmy didn't give his rating.
As of right now, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. I want to give it a 10 out of 10. I do want to give it a 10 out of 10 in terms of the emotional experience, but for the sake of trying to be objective, I have to admit there are a couple of things. And like I said, it hardly matters, but to me, 9.5, that's pretty damn near a 10. It's just it's my way of acknowledging that.
Well, if it's damn near a 10, then why not make it a 10?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Let me watch
9.5 or 10. I'm gonna round it off. I'm rounding off. Fuck it.
Okay. The only thing I'm gonna say, I still think Spider-Man 2 is a slightly better film than this, and mainly it's because of what Nick was bringing up earlier. Spider-Man 2 didn't have a history of Spider-Mans on screen to fall back on. It didn't have the ability to pull on our childhoods and bring in all different things. It had to be a spectacular Spider-Man movie just by telling a completely original Spider-Man story on its own without pulling on the entire history of the mythology and pulling the nostalgia string. So I have to give it a little bit credit, because I think that's harder to pull off, to make something as good as that when you don't have as much as like this movie has so much that it could pull from. So much that it could rely on that. I think credit needs to be given where some filmmakers manage to make something that's spectacular without those benefits.
Definitely.
Sure.
Awesome. So to end this on a great note also, it's been reported actually on various social media sites that James Cameron has suffered a complete mental breakdown and is crying hysterically because superhero movies are still doing very, very well according to the box office of this film. So hope that old man sucks it, even though he's great. But shout out James Cameron.
Something. I need a comment on that. James Cameron, like I know that he's wants to. I get like his anger and everything, but the thing is, look, one of your most famous things, James Cameron, is The Terminator, which is time travel and action. I know it's not a comic book and it's not based off one.
Sci-fi.
Now it's a comic book.
But I mean,
exactly. Now it is.
But the thing is,
to me, imagination.
That type of filmmaking and that type of storytelling is directly in line with superhero or comic book storytelling. I was like, don't wag your finger because you've done stuff that's of a similar type. I think it would appeal to the same type of people. I think people who are into Terminator films would also be into DC or Marvel movies. It's within the same wheelhouse. Come on.
Well, I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator, he's a superhero. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, Judgment Day confirms that he's a superhero. He makes a sacrifice. He sacrifices himself. He's a hero.
He's both a supervillain and a superhero, and he's great at both. He's a great supervillain and a great superhero.
And on top of that comment you said about that fool, forget Matt Damon too. He's a superhero hater, film hater as well.
It's weird. Jason Bourne is a hero. Well, I don't vigilante. Anti-hero.
Vigilante.
But we know those are topics for another day, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Topics for another day, but want to end it on a great note. Thank you guys so much for joining us on today's awesome episode. We had a lot of fun talking about this movie. It was something we've been wanting to do for a long time, and so much anticipation brewing for this film. It is great. Make sure you guys check it out. And if you guys like our content, make sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, follow us on IG at Heroes and Mutants Podcast. Thank you guys so much and have an amazing day.
Yeah, and low-key, I'm Spider-Man.
You're Spider-Man.